My name is Justin Ellis. This is the Topwater Podcast, and this is going to be the episode 5, just keep them rolling them out. Trying to, at least. I'm trying to be really consistent with these, and I'm trying to just try to improve each and every episode, which I know at a certain point, they're just going to kind of plateau a little bit. And, but that's where just fishing and the whole experiences of fishing, the different day-to-day things, that's going to keep this podcast fresh and new and hopefully exciting. Hopefully. I want this to be fairly entertaining for you guys, but, well, this past week was Christmas week, and it was a pretty good week, got some presents for my nieces and nephews, and that was just a fun time spending with, the fam. What am I, 21 years old? The family, it was nice, lovely little Christmas, had a little bit of Christmas dinner, but I ended up going over to my dad's a little bit early, hanging out with them, because I was planning on going fishing that day, because it was extremely warm on Christmas. We had just amazing weather as far as like weather goes. I mean, it was 70 degrees, fairly calm. The wind was blowing a little bit, but nothing that you really couldn't, handle or anything like that. But I ended up going out to Springfield Lake on Christmas Day, and I kind of figured that it would be a fairly low amount of people there, but there was actually a lot of people out. Really thinking about it, I should have expected that, because there's going to be a lot of people who get things like kayaks and, drones and RC cars, and, they're going to want to go out and have fun with the family and maybe go to a park, go for a hike, not just being stuck indoors because it's cold and winter, but actually be able to get out and be able to experience something with your family. And there was a lot of people out doing that, and that was pretty cool to see. But it did mean that when I got there, there was more people out than I was expecting it to. But that just meant that I didn't have the lake to myself. And that's fine. There's still plenty of water. So I ended up getting out there, and I was expecting to... Well, since it was so warm, I was thinking I should probably try to find the shallow spots. Some of the shallow spots that didn't have mud on them, find the more hard bottom shallow spots on Springfield Lake, and go there and maybe throw like an underspin or throw something else. And I had just a regular ball head, for a swim bait attached onto my rod, and I had a Bass Pro screw-in underspin. It's actually kind of neat. I'm actually glad to see these, because sometimes in a pinch, if you lose your underspins, or maybe you didn't bring one but you have one of these, you can attach it to whatever swim bait that you're using, and that's pretty cool. I like that. Adds a little bit of flash to your swim bait. It's a nifty little thing. I'm glad to see more people actually like Bass Pro, because I think Owner was the first company that I actually heard of doing those. They had the screw lock with the underspin underneath, which, like I said, I like adding flash to those swim baits, and I really have grown to really enjoy throwing swim baits. I actually think I'm going to start trying to use more swim baits and, start getting gear for it. But, so I got there and I was throwing into the shallows, and I was noticing that there was fish into the shallow areas, but the fish were carp. Maybe since it was fairly warm, but there wasn't any sort of bait fish. I wasn't seeing any bait fish up shallow. I was just seeing carp. So after kind of realizing that, I kind of went to the other side of the lake, which the south end is much deeper. It's, like 15 foot, something like that, 15, 16 foot. which is considerably deeper than the rest of the lake. So the rest of the lake is like 3 foot and under. So it's really fun during the summer. That lake is an awesome lake during the summer. You have lots of grass, lots of hydrilla, lily pads, just a ton of cover, just a nice diverse grass population in a very small amount, small area. And since nobody takes the bass out of there, those bass get pretty decently sized. So you get, 3-4 pound bass in these lily pads blowing up on them, and they get even bigger than that. I've caught bigger bass than that into that lake. And, I've seen bigger bass get caught out of that lake. I caught one bass that was 5 pounds out of a little like drainage inlet on that lake. Really fun lake to fish during the summer. But with it being wintertime, they're still in these wintertime patterns. They're still holding to these areas. And I know they are because I'm not seeing them up shallow, and I've caught them out deep. It's just, I think what's happened is they've moved up shallower into the water column. They just haven't moved, or maybe they have moved towards the mud side of these deeper channels that are on this lake, that are like right next to the grass lines, the old, like the dead grass that's along the shallow side of that channel. So I think they're stacking up off of those points. I just haven't been able to catch them. I think the reason why I haven't been catching any of them is really because of the fact that I think I need to either upsize my bait or maybe downsize. I think maybe downsizing my bait should be the way to go, because if I'm consistently not catching fish, then maybe I need to really think about the lure selection. What am I throwing that is not catching these fish? And really trying to slow down and really take a good look at my tackle, a good look at the approach that I'm having towards these fish. Because if I'm being consistently terrible at fishing in 2 separate lakes, and especially one lake that I used to be really good at back in the summertime, I mean, I was able to go out there and consistently catch fish each and every time, at least being able to catch one. Like, if it was a post-frontal condition, I would at least get one fish. I could at least get one. Now I just struggle to even get a bite, and I have to change something up. I have to figure it out. And I did a little bit of research on YouTube, and I watched a few videos, and some of the videos that the guys were talking about were to upsize and downsize. A really good video is from those tactical bassing guys. They just came out with one talking about this very subject right here. So that video pretty much directly applies to this situation. And I'm willing to give anything a try at this point. So I'm planning on downsizing my equipment, and I'm planning on, downsizing the baits that I'm using. I'm probably going to try to go to a single tail grub and just maybe try jigging that, maybe using a smaller spoon when I go back out to Stockton, because next weekend is going to be really nice. It's going to have, 50 degrees, 40, 50 degree weather. It's not going to be raining. This weekend, it's supposed to be raining today. And, it's just, I don't have the equipment. Well, I don't have a rain jacket, so I'm not going to go out there and get rained on and get sick. And, it's just not worth it. I might as well just stay inside, cook some dinner, which is really cool, because one of my Christmas presents is a tomahawk steak. So I'm going to go get some lump coal and some wood chips, and I'm going to smoke that bad boy. And I'm going to have me a delicious steak. It's going to be great. I'm probably going to saute some onions and put that over the top with some blue cheese and let that stuff smoke on top of it, it's going to be delicious. I'm going to have, it's going to be great. I thought about getting jalapenos too, but I don't know. Sauteed onions and jalapenos with blue cheese over the top. Go with the spicy and blue cheese. Could be the way to go. I don't know. I'm willing to try stuff out. I like some vegetables on my big hunks of meat. It's delicious. I mean, I cooked one last year, but I cooked it into the oven, and it doesn't quite do it service. I feel like when it comes down to cooking food and cooking meat, I think a good way to go is to go ahead and slow smoke it and then just try to reverse sear it. The problem is I don't have a pan big enough to reverse sear that thing, so I'm kind of in a way at a loss. I wish I had a propane torch. If I had a propane torch, I could just take the propane torch on to the top of it and just roast the top and do it like that, but I don't have one, unfortunately. Oh well. But I'm gonna back to the point is, this weekend just wasn't indicative for kayak fishing, and I am going to be going out and getting a rain jacket pretty soon, probably this weekend, because especially coming up in the springtime. Oh, if it's raining out, especially if it's not too windy, if it's not like horrible storming, like really bad storms just rolling in on me, I think I'll be all right going out there. And, I'm fine with dealing with the, rain. As long as I have something to keep me dry, I'll go out there in the rain all day. That's not a problem for me. I mean, it's whatever. But I want to be able to go out there and take advantage of the fish moving extremely shallow in those times. Because when it starts raining, they're going to jump to the backs of creeks and they're going to go as shallow as possible. And they're going to be trying to feed on the stuff that's going to be getting washed into the water, which is a great opportunity for me to be able to get out there and take advantage of that. But I just need the equipment to be able to keep me dry and to be able to keep me out there doing what I want to do and be able to catch fish and make some content, That's what I want to try to do with this. And it's just a great idea overall, especially if I get caught into some sort of pop-up storm, or maybe it's super windy out. It's a great way to be able to stay warm, because since it's waterproof, it's not going to allow wind to be able to shoot through the fabric and cool me off. And it's not going to, it'll keep me a little bit warmer on the windier days, keep me out there. And that's what I want to try to make sure that's what I want to do when I get out there, is just to be able to stay out there for longer, And I think apart from getting a rain jacket, I also want to get lights onto my boat, because one of the reasons why I didn't go out to Stockton this week is because I was having to leave work right after we get off work. So I had to work after Christmas, the 2 days following, and I would have to leave from work and go directly out to the lake and then go fishing. And I only had a few hours to make something happen, which, of course, I didn't really make anything happen, just because I was kind of being thick-headed about it and just I was eliminating water, essentially. I figured, I thought that they would move into certain areas, and they didn't move into certain areas, and that just kind of ate up time. And really, I think it might have been a lure selection. If I would have had maybe small single-tail grubs, or maybe an A-rig, that's something that actually I have only thrown once, and I didn't get a bite on it, and I haven't thrown it since. And I've watched videos on people throwing them, and, I've seen people catch fish on A-rigs. I don't know. I just haven't ever thrown it. I need to, if I'm going to do that, I need to take the reel off of my heavy duty. Well, it's not like a heavy duty catfishing rod, but it is a catfishing rod, but it's long and kind of, it has a good medium action. It's a heavy action rod, but heavy action rod. It's a heavy rod, medium action. It's nice and bendy, but it's meant for being able to fight catfish, big catfish, and it's meant to be able to handle big baits. So, and it's a bait casting rod, but I'm going to switch out the reel on it because it's, I don't like that reel for casting, like any sort of swim bait. I used it for a little bit with a glide bait, and I really enjoyed having the rod, that bigger rod, and being able to handle that weight, but I didn't like that reel. It's just, it's an Abu Garcia. I think it's an Abu. No. It's a Shakespeare. It's just a cheap Shakespeare rod. The thing is my old reel broke that was originally on it, and I needed a new reel because I was going up to see some family up in Kansas and do some catfishing. And, you can't have a broken reel and go catfishing. So I'm just going to switch that one out for my bass reel that's on a different rod. And the reason why I'm switching those out is because I need to fix the eyelid onto that. I have a medium heavy, moderate action, and it says it's medium heavy, but it's a pretty thick rod, and it has some backbone to it. So it's able to really kind of deal with some weight. So I put a swim bait on there, the Live Target trout swim bait that I bought, which, I mean, it's a $13 swim bait, not cheap. It's not the most expensive bait out there. I was actually looking up Huddleston's today, and because to really get into it, the reason why I was looking up for Huddleston's is because this time of year, I guess from what I understand, is if you're not being successful on the baits that you were using, maybe it's the size of the bait. It could be the color of the bait, but it's probably the size of the bait. So they're not eating this 4-inch, 5-inch, like this 4-inch Strike King swim bait that I was using. So I either need to upsize it to a rather large bait or downsize it to a very small bait, like a single tail grub, like a little 3-inch grub, something small, or something large, like an 8-inch Huddleston. But one of these Huddlestons that I was looking at was like $80 on Amazon. I think it was the 10-inch Huddleston. It was just expensive. I don't know if that's the actual price on like Tackle Warehouse. I would need to look that up. But, you're still talking that's a lot of money for a lure that you may just cast off. So the reason why I'm switching these rods is because I had this bait, this Live Target trout swim bait, and I went to cast it. Well, the end of the rod, when I bought it, because I bought it at the outlet, it had a defect on it because the end of the rod, the tip there's no insert. There's no ceramic insert into the tip. All the other eyelids have ceramic inserts and the tips didn't. So I guess it was just some sort of defect, but they were discounted priced, and I went ahead and bought one. And I was like, okay, I was using 65-pound braid in it, and that just seemed to be fine. But I switched it all over to mono because I was dealing with these bigger swim baits, and I wanted something that wouldn't just. I just didn't have faith into a connection knot, and that's okay because I really don't need to have. I don't necessarily need to have braid onto it. I could probably get away with dropping down to like a 14-pound fluorocarbon, maybe not fluorocarbon, but 14-pound mono. I really kind of want that stretch. I want that forgiveness. I don't want anything that's going to snap because that's a pretty decent size bait, and I want to be able to fling it. So I'm just going to use mono. And yeah. So, but what had happened is I went to cast that bait. And as I went to cast it, the line broke. The line snapped at the end of the rod where that eyelid is. That bait was too heavy for that eyelid to like not cut through that mono, and it just snapped the first cast. And it lands right next to me in the water, and I just see this thing just swimming down. And it's not like I was in a couple feet of water to where I could probably take a treble hook bait and just drag it right underneath me and be able to find it, hook onto it somehow and be able to get it back. No, I was in like 15, 16 foot of water, and this thing went down to the depths. There was no way I was going to get this thing back without some sort of like magnet. I would have to have a magnet and do some like magnet fishing, but that's okay. It's part of fishing, and it's a heartbreaker. It is a very, very hard. I mean, especially when it was the first cast too with it too. I was expecting here, because I would like to catch a big fish on a big swim bait. It's a little bit of a fantasy for me, because I see these guys on YouTube catching these big giant fish on these big giant swim baits, and it's just, you kind of have this idea of, something, and you want that idea to come true, but the only way to do it is to actually go out there and do it. So, I was trying it and trying to do some big swim bait fishing. Well, I just didn't have the proper gear. My gear was defective, and I lost a $13 swim bait. But since I lost a $13 swim bait, that means I'm in the market for a new one. And being in the market for a new one, I may just buy an 8-inch Huddleston, which those are not necessarily cheap. They're like, I don't know, like $20, $30 for like an 8-inch, I think. Maybe 30, 40. It's definitely a $20 plus bait. For sure over $20. You're not getting it for under $20. I've also heard of the trash. The two I want to try out is the Huddleston and the trash fish. Those are the two I want to try out, which I'll probably try to pick those up pretty soon. Pretty soon I'll be trying to pick those up. But I'm just going to have to just wait on those. Just for a little bit, I'm not going to take forever, but I'm just going to wait for a little bit. I'm going to save up and make sure that I can that I have like the actual equipment to be able to handle those. Like, I want to make sure that I would at least like to have a decent swim bait rod to be able to handle that. And I think this ugly stick's going to work. It's not going to be the most sensitive thing in the world, but I don't know if I necessarily need it to be sensitive. Or maybe I do. I wouldn't mind picking up a Dobbins, like a heavy action Dobbins rod, like a long one, a nice 8-foot rod. That'd be cool. Be able to launch that bad boy a mile. That'd be cool. But I don't know what I would pair that up with. I don't want to I would like to change out my two Bass Pro reels with something different. I'm not a big fan of them. They were budget reels, and they just, they've served their purpose, but I would like to upgrade them. But yeah, so I ended up going fishing the next couple of days, just to get back onto topic. I went fishing the next couple of days after work, and I was still trying the underspin tactic. I was trying to drop shot a little bit, but I don't know if I have necessarily the patience for that. And that's something I'm just going to have to overcome that. I'm just going to have to anchor down and just sit down and finesse fish for a while. Just force myself to finesse fish. Force myself to slow down. Or like go out to Stockton, and if I find like huge schools of fish, maybe use like I said, a little 3-inch grub and drop that down. Maybe throw on one of those screw-in underspins, those screw-in little blades, and screw that into the bottom of the little grub or something. Just add a little bit of flash, so that way it sets it apart from the rest of the school. So I'm definitely wanting to do that, but I also want to buy a bigger bait. And I do have a $25 gift card to Bass Pro. So what I might just do is go to Bass Pro and try to find the biggest swim bait possible that I could find. Just to try it. I really would like to try big swim baiting. I think I would actually really enjoy it. I throwing around that live target was actually really fun, but I think the next one I'm going to get is if I get another live target, it's going to be a shad pattern. I just don't know if I have too much confidence in that sort of a trout pattern. And also, I don't think it was big enough, because I think it was only like 6 inches. Yeah, I'm going to say it was 6 inches. I'm going to say it was a 6-inch bait, which apparently I need to go a little bit larger. Like, I need to go 8. Like, need to step it up a couple inches. But, so, that's the reason why I was looking at the Huddleston. But I was also looking at the trash fish, because apparently that one's also supposed to be really good when it starts getting really cold. Whenever the water becomes extremely cold, that bait actually works a lot better, because it's a very, very, very soft plastic. But apparently it's one of those it's so soft that you have to just slow roll it. You cannot burn it back. It just blows out all over the place. It's not meant for that. It just looks so weird when it does it. And apparently it just doesn't catch any fish when you're just burning it. It's a very, very slow fished bait, which that's fine with me, because the fish that I'm looking for aren't necessarily the, what you would call, well, I'm looking for bigger fish. I am looking for the biggest fish that I can catch. I am looking for multiple fish, but I'm looking for bigger fish, So I think having a big swim bait, and I'm just going to go with those two things, and I'm probably going to have just a couple of rods with me. I'm going to at least drop one. I'm not going to have, I'm going to have my Dobbins, the swim bait rod, my ugly stick. Then I'm also going to have my spinning setup, which that's what I'm going to have my little guppy, my little single tail grub, and then probably I'll have my jig. I'll have the jig set up, which I do want to. I'm going to have to change the line on that. I went straight mono on it. I'm going back to braid on that. I'm gonna downsize the size of the braid. I'm gonna go down to like a 20-pound braid, just because I want something that's sensitive, instead of, I don't need anything for like really, really heavy cover, So I think a 20-pound braid with a, maybe, just a 14-pound mono leader. It doesn't have to be. I want something that has some size to it. I don't want like a 12-pound or an 8-pound. This is a jig, so it's going to sink. I'm not worried about it like sinking or making the depth or anything like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and just keep it at a fairly decently sized mono leader. But I do want the mono leader because of the stretch. I don't necessarily want, something like too rigid. I want to be able to play the fish. I don't know. I just have a little bit more faith in it. And that's just personal preference too. Some people like that fluorocarbon leader, and maybe in really clear water, that's the way to go. If it was clear water, I would definitely be looking into fluorocarbon instead of a mono leader. That's 100% sure. But I'm not going to worry about that at this point because I'm not really fishing super, super clear water. This isn't crystal clear. I mean, we're talking, 3-4 feet of visibility, which is pretty decent. That's pretty clear, but not so clear to where it's like, man, I better have fluorocarbon. It's not 30 feet of visibility. It's not to where you can sit on one side of the lake and look underneath it and go, man, I can see the other side of the lake. That's pretty wild, sort of thing. It's not that clear. No, we're not talking that. We're talking pretty dingy, but it's not just stained. You're not talking mud. So what I think is that size change is the way to go. The size change is what needs to happen here. And instead of just beating my head against the wall and just trying the same thing over and over and over again, to just kind of switch it up just a little bit. I'm still going to try to keep the same colors. So I'm still going to go with a pearl white just to kind of match that shad pattern. Or, maybe some... Also, what I've thought about is cutting down my robo worms from being a 6-inch robo worm to being like a 4-inch robo worm. Just cutting it all the way down almost to the tail and seeing if that doesn't change anything. Maybe wacky rig the other side and see if that doesn't do anything either. We'll see. And maybe I can get into the school of white bass going out to Stockton Lake. And that's some fun right there. I love getting into a school of white bass. I've gotten into one, and it was on Stockton Lake. I went out when it was still kind of flooding, but the flooding was coming down. The flooding was receding. And I went really far back up into the creek, and there was a corner to where this field was emptying out to. So the field had flooded, but it had receded enough to where most of the field was exposed, but it was still kind of draining out at that point. But it was going from this much clearer water to a really dingy, dirty stain. So it created a sort of little pocket on this corner because it made a 90-degree bend at this corner. It made a mud line right there. And there was a giant school of white bass that were tucked into this corner. And the way that I was catching them was to just throw it out. And at first I was catching the top ones, and they weren't very big. But what I would do is I would cast out, and I had a MEPS, one of those like single bladed inline spinners. And it has some sort of like natural tail to it, like an animal tail, usually like squirrel or deer, or I think, what's another one? Squirrel, deer, and I don't know. There's a few different types. They come in different colors. They have a little red rooster tail on the end. They are just wonderful for like ponds. They work for white bass. I love using them. So, and what I would do is I would throw it out, and it would just sink to the bottom. I would just let it sink to the bottom. And by the time it started getting close to the bottom, you would feel a little tick, and all you'd have to do is set the hook. You didn't really have to reel it at all. You just set the hook, and there they were. And some of the most fun fights I had ever had. Just the best day on the water. It was just so much fun. They fight just so hard. Just they would dig down, they would pull drag. And I even caught one that was like 16 inches. It was a huge fish. At least white bass. It was a big white bass. It was strong. I was using bait casting gear. I wasn't using spinning setups. And I went back the next week, and I just couldn't find the school. It had moved on from that spot. There had been some like major storms that had happened at that point. Maybe they had moved further up the creek. I don't know. But if there's these huge schools of bait there and there's all this fish activity right there, maybe there's some white bass in the area, or maybe there's some crappie in the area, That'd be a really cool thing to find, is a whole bunch of crappie and white bass. I would have a blast just catching crappie and white bass. Just going out there and just slaying them. That'd be fun. I tried using a jigging spoon, but that didn't seem to work. So maybe using like a little grub, that might work. I've also kind of tossed around the idea of taking... I got a little bucket of livers, and I've also chopped up I had some little bit of chicken breast that I went ahead and sacrificed for, and I just cut up one of the chicken breasts and I tossed it in there with it. So it's been marinating in liver juices for a while, so it should be nice and ripe and ready to go. So I'm also thinking about taking that out and maybe trying to do a little bit of channel catfishing. A little bit, That's always a fun time. I love catfishing. It's just, for me, it's just one of those nostalgia things to where it just takes me back to being a kid, sitting on the bank of, creeks and rivers, with my uncle, my dad, starting campfires and roasting weenies. It was just a fun time, and it's really amazing just scenery, especially when you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's no city lights and you're able to look up and just see just the stars. You're just able to see everything on a clear night. Oh, it's just so amazing out there. And you're just sitting there waiting, telling stories, stoked in the campfire. And, especially when I got a little bit older and, turned 21, able to sit down and have a couple beers with my uncle, that's pretty fun. It's essentially camping and fishing all in one, and it's just fun. It's an amazing time. It's so relaxing. And it's a whole bunch of waiting all the way up until the point you hear the clickers starting to go off and you hear this, and it's like, oh, here we go. Especially if you're in a dead sleep, it's late at night, and you're just waiting for whatever to happen. Something. You're waiting for something, And you have to check your baits every once in a while. You have to make sure you do that, because sometimes you get stripped and you don't even know it. Or sometimes your baits are dead. A turtle will get it and you have nothing but a head sitting there. Which, if you have just a head sitting there, sometimes you will get a flathead and sometimes you will get a channel cat. They'll still come up and eat the head. Even though the turtle has, already ate it, catfish will come up and eat that head. But the cool thing about that is, it's almost like a little rebate thing. Oh, you don't have live bait anymore? Well, now you have a head. Head still works. Fish still eat it. But they're fun. They're so much fun to catch. They're so big and powerful, too. Especially when they start getting big. Like, into the 20s, start pulling drag, ripping drag out. Oh, yeah. The biggest flathead I've caught, I think, is 11 pounds. That's the biggest flathead. But it's not the one that gave me the most flight. See, my 11-pound flathead, it just kind of went with it, It was in the current, so it was kind of hard. It felt really heavy. It felt big, but it wasn't fighting. It just kind of came up with it. It swam up the river. Now, the one before that, I caught a 9-pound flathead, which these aren't very big flatheads, by the way. Flathead, like, when they start being a decent size, you're talking like into the 20s. And then when you start talking like trophy size, you're talking like 40s and 50s. So, and, world record size, you're talking like over 100 pounds for a flathead. So these things get pretty big. So actually fishing for them's fun. Really, I really enjoy it. But the best time, the only time I've really ever fished for flathead is during the night during the evenings and night, and that's usually when they're the most active. I guess they're not very active during the winter time. They're more of a summertime animal, because I guess from what I understand, they may even go into some sort of like hibernation. Now, this is not legitimate information. I am not a biologist of any accounts, and this is secondhand fisherman information, so take it for what you will. Take it with a grain of salt. This could be a Bigfoot myth sort of thing. Like, catfish hibernate just like bears. Yeah, they do. But, yeah. So, I always enjoyed trying to kind of mix it up and just fish for different species and just not always particularly go after the same one. I really like going after bass. Largemouth bass are one of my favorite types of fish to actually fish for, just because of how much gear you go through. I mean, I can just geek out on all the different bass gear that I can get my hands on. It just, it's almost akin to like, women in shoe shopping or dudes in shoe shopping, people in general in shoe shopping, because I've talked to some people and they're like, dude, Nike and Yeezys, they just start rattling off, and I'm like, whoa, I don't have enough time for that, for your brand stuff. But then it comes down to me and I'm like, dude, with the zoom, and then you got big bite baits. Well, have you tried reaction innovations, Sweet Beaver on the back of your trailers or as a punch rig? What are you doing? And, and some people just don't want to hear it, they're like, look, man, I don't have time to learn all the different fishing stuff that you want to throw out at me. And just, dude, just give me a simple package. I just want a little bit of information, and that's all I want, and that's all I need. Quit telling me every single little detail of all the stuff that you own. So, bass fishing is fun because of the fact that I do get to actually geek out on gear, and there's technical things about it. How you fish the baits. They're casting, skipping underneath stuff, flipping into cover. Working. Frog fishing is just by far my favorite. Just being able to work a frog across lily pads and watching a bass blow up through the lily pads and just hammering that thing. Or, walking it past a little grass point and all of a sudden it just comes up and just eats it. Oh. And the first one, every time it gets me. It gets me every time. I just cannot help it, but I see it happen, and I know I should just be a little bit patient and just kind of wait, just reel down to them and get the line tight and set the hook and allow them to get that, frog into their mouth. But I don't. Every time it's just like, blow up, set the hook. It's just some sort of like impulse, impatient, just, it just gets me. And then afterwards, I'm just shaking. I'm like, oh, I got to toss back in there. That's when I need to be ready with something else. And be ready with like some sort of like toss in, like maybe like a Senko. Like get me a wacky rig Senko or something like that. Or, a Texas rig Senko. Just something weightless, just boop, throw it right in there. Or like a Texas, what I was using was a Texas rigged, I think it was a rage bug. Yeah, a Texas rigged rage bug. I was doing that in this sort of brown, blue, bluegill pattern. And I watched a couple of them come out and eat it. That was pretty cool. It's always really cool when you can watch something come out and eat your bait. And, yeah. So, summertime is going to be coming up. But that's not that's going to be here pretty soon. And it's going to be interesting, too, especially since I am going to be fishing Stockton Lake way more, which I think being in a kayak, if we get as much rain as we did last year, and I think this is something that I'm going to have to expect, and this is something that I do want to make sure I am prepared for, but I think it gives me the opportunity as a kayak fisherman to be able to take advantage of the flooding water and to get into areas that some people just really aren't able to get into, especially with big bass boats. Now, that also being said, there was areas to where I was trying to get into, and there was no way I was getting into them, just because you would have giant log jams of just debris and all this other stuff, and you just weren't able to get way back up into these creeks because the main channel was clogged up, and it's so thick because you're not going through the bottoms of trees, even though here's the thing. If you were to actually walk those banks where I was at on Stockton Lake, I actually went bank fishing, and ended up walking about 8 miles and did very little fishing, by the way, because of how thick this brush is. Because you would have to literally walk in straight, and I mean, it was almost a zigzag pattern, but you would have to find a spot that you wanted to fish, and you would have to, because you couldn't just walk down the bank. The brush is so thick through there that you would have to come out of it and then walk the tree line, and then walk back in through it. Because it was just so thick, if you wanted to make any sort of progress at any time, it was easier to come out of the brush and walk along the tree line on the field, and then go back into the brush, and then find your way back to the river. And it was so thick, I ended up losing a jacket. Somewhere along the way, I lost my jacket. I don't know where. I don't know. That sucks because it was a nice jacket. And also, it sucks because, you're leaving stuff in the woods, and that's not a good thing either. You don't want to leave trash in the woods. But there was no way I would have known where that thing was, because it was on my pack all day, and there was a point in time to where I don't remember seeing it. And there was a lot of walking through a lot of really thick brush. And I don't know if I could have found that thing. I really don't think I would have found it. But the thing is I would have, and there were certain places I would get to, and I would be probably about 20 yards from the bank to where I could see a spot to where I could possibly cast out. And I would walk up. And what I would have to do is I would have to leave my pack. I would have to leave my other couple of rods and take the one rod that I was going to use. So I would either have to make sure the bait that I was going to use, the baits that I was going to use, anything that I needed, I would have to take with me. And I would have to take with me and not have, if I didn't bring it, I didn't get it. Because once I came back out, I was not going to go back through this. Because you're talking about, you're climbing underneath stuff. I was having to push my rod underneath these bush limbs. And it's these crazy, they were tree-ish, bush-ish stuff. I don't know what they were. I don't know what type of tree they were. I mean, I wish I knew. Because they're all over this lake. Which is really cool, because that makes seeing all this terrain and seeing all these bushes, now I'm really thinking this is going to be a flipping bonanza. I am going to have a fun time with a frog and flipping gear. I'm going to have fun with this. This is going to be a different experience. I think I'm going to be able to use the same pattern as I was at Springfield Lake here. But I think it's just going to be on a much larger scale, and the type of structure and the type of cover, not the type of structure. Well, the structure too, because Springfield Lake does have chunk rock. It does have bluffs and chunk rock, so it is kind of the same in that regard. There are those, but there's going to be these big bush trees that are going to be awesome for fish to be able to get in and sit there and wait for other bait fish to come around and ambush them. So what I'm looking at is a lot of flipping cover and a lot of things that I need to flip to, which that's just going to be that's going to be my go-to thing, is flipping and frogs. Using a frog around trees, and flipping cover, and using an underspin and possibly a swim jig. I'll probably use a swim jig and just go back and forth between the swim jig and the underspin. Maybe during like springtime, whenever they're pre-spawn, I'll probably use a swim bait. But when it starts getting into the summertime, I'll probably switch over to the underspin profile, just because it's a little bit slimmer of a profile, and it's probably going to serve my needs a lot better. Being able to come through that cover a lot better is probably not going to hang up as much, especially with that owner flashy swimmer. Those ones are really nice for the for cover and not getting hung up, because you can actually Texas rig it, because it has a screw lock, and you can Texpose it. So it's really nice for coming through cover and getting it around trees, in and around stuff, throwing it shallow. Yeah. So I think that's going to be the plan coming up into summer. But right now it's a struggle, Right now it's really a struggle. But man, I got to say, I am really kind of thinking about it. I am so fortunate to be able to go out 3 days in a row. I was able to go out Christmas Day and go fishing. I was able to go out after work Thursday and Friday to go fishing. And today I'm doing this podcast. So, it's I got to think about that. And it is just so awesome that I'm able to actually do that. And it's awesome that I'm able to actually get out there and try to make something happen as far as figuring out patterns and the different patterns that these fish are in, and just expand my knowledge of fishing and expand the different skill sets that are required in fishing. And being able to have the time to be able to go do that. I mean, it's just something that I didn't think I would actually be able to start to accomplish something like this, to be able to go down this sort of journey. And, and I think having these sorts of weeks to where you're having just back-to-back days of just struggling, it makes you have to look into like what you're doing and how you're doing it, and the different types of techniques that you're implementing during the day and during the time, and what time you're going to. How are you utilizing your time? So it really gives you the time to look in at yourself, because you could blame the lakes, you could blame the river, you could blame the weather, you could blame your gear, you could blame the lure, you could blame everything you're doing to everything else. But at the end of the day, all these are your decisions. You made a decision to fish this certain area, and that didn't pan out. And I don't want to be the type of person that sits there and just gets frustrated and just blames the equipment. It just blames everything else but myself. I know that at the end of the day, me not catching fish is still a clue. It is still information. It is still something that I can take and utilize to my advantage the next time. Because just because something didn't happen doesn't mean that it is not useful. It's kind of, it is hard to explain, but it's wonderful to be able to have the chance to be able to experience things like this that give you that sort of insight into yourself, and to be able to give you that sort of, nuance about what you're trying to accomplish, and trying to be able to bring your own unique touch to the table. And That's what I want to be able to share all the experience of fishing. Not just, I want to be able to share the days to where I just murder them and I'm just destroying them and just catching them left and right. And I want to be able to give you the fun fishing stories of just being able to catch tons of white bass and being able to just have a blast of it. But also I want to bring you the opposite side of it. The days to where you think that you're just doing everything wrong, and be able to share those sorts of experiences and how I actually handle it, and try to handle it better myself, and try to grow as a fisherman and try to be better as a fisherman. Because that's what it is. What's the point of actually going out there and doing all this if it wasn't to actually get better at the thing that I love doing, and to find new things to enjoy and find new things to appreciate. And it seems like every time I go out, I find something that I do appreciate, and I think some of the big things that I appreciate when I go out is just the sheer immensity of the size of the area. You really do feel small. Walking those 8 miles across that bank, you really start to get sort of a perspective on how life was lived a long time ago. And it really gives you an appreciation for the things that you actually do have in life. Because like I was talking earlier in this episode, being able to eat that tomahawk steak. If this was, few hundred years ago, that tomahawk steak, I would have had to hunt and kill that animal. There wasn't a grocery store for that thing. There was markets. You had markets, but there was a good chance that you were going to have to go out and hunt and kill that animal in order to have that cut of meat specifically. And being able to go out and walk these banks and being able to get out onto the river and, paddle around and go 3 miles to a spot that it may pan out, it may not, but to be able to go out and to do those things and have the time and have the ability, it's just such a blessing. And it really is. And it's so awesome to be able to go out and just appreciate the outdoors and to really just immerse myself into the environment that I love, and to be able to bring it to other people and to share that with other people and share those experiences. I love sharing fishing stories. Fishing stories are some of my favorite things to talk about and some of my favorite things to listen to. Some of my favorite things to do, I love going up to Kansas and sitting at a table with my uncle and just knocking back a couple beers and just talking about fishing stories and talking about hunting stories and talking about different, experiences that happened in life. And it's just so fun to be able to do that and just to sit there and enjoy a story being told and enjoy listening to that and being able to take those experiences and maybe to apply those experiences to the next time I go out fishing. And find something new to be able to appreciate. And that's what I want. That's what I try to do. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is to share those experiences, share those fishing stories, to talk about the days to where it's just nothing but chaos and debacles and, mulligan cast after mulligan cast, it's kind of like this week. If sticks were bass, if logs were bass, I would have been able to just line the walls with the amount of sticks that I caught. I could have built a house with the amount of lumber that I hooked into this week. That's really the reality of it. My entire fishing experience this week was a lot of figuring out that there's wood at the bottom of Springfield Lake. That's what I figured out, is there's a lot of snags. And if If there was one, I found it. And that's just kind of the reality that I was living in this week. And that's part of it. And you know what? I found a new appreciation to being able to unhook my lures, being able to get my lure back. You know what? If there's one skill that you don't ever want to work on, but it's a nifty skill to have, it's unhooking lures out of snags. So, and maybe that's a tip. One of the things I do, I mean, of course, my paddle has a lure retrieve little slot onto it, so I can knock them out. But another one is, especially if you're in a kayak, you can take, which is a cheap method to do. You can actually buy little knockers that are specifically built for this, that are probably a little bit better to do, more equipped to do it. Because there's been times to where the paperclip method didn't work, but you can just take a paperclip and attach a weight to it. I usually try to use a pretty hefty weight, like a 2-ounce weight. Nothing littler than that. I like some weight to be able to knock that thing loose. You know, I want to be able to hop it up and knock it. But yeah, so that's a skill that I got to work on this week, is being able to unhook lures out of snags. And you know what? You got to take the good with the bad. You got to take the bad with the good. And the silver lining this week is, you know what? I worked on casting underneath stuff, which I've really starting to get pretty decent at it. I am not, throwing stuff into trees as much anymore. And I've really gotten pretty good at getting my lures back. I've got a couple of deep diving crankbaits that I haven't lost yet, and I'm pretty glad that I haven't lost them, because those aren't cheap. And yeah. So, and I can't wait to get out there next weekend, because next weekend I think it's supposed to be partially cloudy and like 40, 50 degrees out. So they should still be in that wintertime pattern. And I'm probably going to go out to Stockton Lake, go out to I think it's called the Rourke Bluff Park. I'm probably going to launch out of there and go fish that riprap, because there's a couple of bridges there, and I'm going to go try to fish some of that riprap with some deep diving crankbaits. Maybe see if I can't do something with that. And I also have an A-rig, which I'm going to try to use, which that's going to be fun, trying that out. I'm not really too experienced with using them, but I mean, I kind of figure it's just to chuck out and wind back. But yeah, so that's kind of the game plan for next week, is to go out to Stockton Lake and hit those riprap areas. I also thought about hitting that north side of the lake there that has a lot of bluff walls and a lot of transition points. So that might not be a bad area to go ahead and see if I can't pick one or two up. That, and also I've thought about stopping in at the local. There's a bait and tackle shop that's on the way, and I'm going to stop in there on Saturday and see if I can't talk to the guy and get a little information out, and maybe find a spot to where I could try out some white bass fishing, or maybe he knows where some bass are hanging out, and he'll probably try to sell me some lures, and I'll probably buy some, because you do need the tackle in order to go fishing. And if you're going to go get information from a tackle shop, I mean, you might as well be buying tackle. And it's I don't ever have a problem buying new tackle. It seems like I have a really bad problem about buying new tackle. That's more of an addiction than anything else. And I need to really curb that addiction, because it's making me go broke. But yeah, all right. So I've had fun going out and enjoying this nice weather, this nice 60, 70 degree weather in December. So I'm looking forward to getting back to the little bit cooler of temperatures, which will be fun, and getting out there onto the old Stockton Lake and seeing if I can't find some bass and see if I can't hook into maybe have me a jolly good time into finding a school of white bass, or maybe just hooking into some largemouths, or maybe do a little bit of catfish. And I don't know. We'll figure them out. We'll figure something out. I'm going to catch something. At the end of the day, I am going to catch something. And that's what I'm going to try to do. So thank you guys for listening. It's been fun. If you guys enjoy what I've been doing here, I'm going to keep doing these. I'm going to keep cranking them out every week, one a week, And so next week will be episode 6. We'll see how I do when it comes down to Stockton. If you like this, go to my Instagram. I'm Justin_TTP. Justin_TTP fishing. You can go to YouTube. My YouTube channel is Justin Ellis. It's the Topwater Podcast on YouTube. Like it, share it. Let's get this out there. Let's grow this podcast. And I just want to say from me to you guys, thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and I hope you guys get out there and get after it, whether it's on a bank, a kayak, a boat, a canoe, even get you a deer stand and hanging off of a sunken tree and fish off that. Figure out some way to get out there and get your line wet. Figure out some way to catch some fish, whether it's panfish, bass, saltwater fishing, any sort of type of fishing. Get out there, get after it, enjoy the outdoors, and have you guys a great day. Thank you very much.